Super cute.
Yes.
Super cute.
Mary Margaret, I didn't make it to the last hackathon. How did it go, this last one?
Boy, that was like 400 years ago, right? So what just happened? I don't think I went to that one,
Oh,
Stephen.
you're kidding.
I think I was on vacation.
I couldn't make it either.
Yeah. They probably fell apart without us, really.
Probably, yes.
All right, I'm gonna let Laura, you cue me when you want to get rolling. I'm happy to hang out for a few more minutes if you think that makes sense, or whatever you think.
Let's see. 5:02. Why don't let's see. I'll give you a spotlight here, and then maybe Amanda can start with an intro.
Sure.
Okay.
Great. So this is part of our Lenten series, our speaker series on Monday nights about listening to other voices humbly. And we have the Reverend Mary Margaret Earl with us today, which is super exciting. And I'm so pleased to introduce her. And I'm an active member of the Community Action Committee, along with Carol Genovese, who's here with us. And we've been working with Mary Margaret for a long time. So the Reverend Mary Margaret Earl has served as Executive Director and Senior Minister of the Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministry for 10 years. In this ministry, she works for racial justice and to strengthen connections between UUs and the Roxbury neighborhood where the UUUM operates. She has served on the leadership team of Moral Movement Massachusetts, the Roxbury Cultural Network, and the search committee for the Roxbury Community College president. Prior to her arrival at the UU Urban Ministry, she spent 10 years at a faith-based nonprofit in Rhode Island, serving the homeless community. She is past president of the board of the Rhode Island Coalition for the Homeless, recipient of the Heroes of Faith Award from the Rhode Island State Council of Churches for her interfaith work, and received a Courage of Conscience Award from the Peace Abbey in Sherborne, Massachusetts. She is a longtime vegan committed to standing up for non-human animals. We are so pleased to have you here, Reverend Mary Margaret Earl, and I turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Amanda. It's very nice to see you and nice to see some familiar faces and to meet some new folks. Thank you for spending a Monday evening to learn more about the work of the urban ministry. I was talking a little bit with Laura earlier and said I don't qualify as a lecturer, so I do want this to be interactive. If folks know how to use the chat function, if you have questions, if you want to put things in the chat function as we go, that'd be great. And I wanted to make this a little bit more engaging than listening to me for a long time only. So I have a slideshow, I have a video clip, and I'm going to be asking for you to be patient with me because I'm going to be fumbling through it. Sometimes it works smoothly, sometimes it's a little glitchy. And I also wanted to see if I wanted to share a document that our board created that really led into our research on the history of enslavement related to First Church. And I wanted us to do it as a bit of a responsive reading or a shared reading. And I wondered if there are people, if you all would be willing to read a section of it aloud as a sort of a shared reading. Is there anybody, can you take me off a spotlight for 1 second, Laura, just so I can see everybody for one more second?
Yes.
Thank you.
Theoretically.
Theoretically. I just want to see if I can see if there's anybody who, don't worry about it. Leave it as it is. Oh, okay, great. Perfectly. If there's anybody who does not wish to read a section, can you raise your hand now and I'll try to skip you if you don't want to do it? Or raise your virtual hand. Okay, I'm going to assume that. So what I'm going to do when we get to that point is just kind of call on people. And I've already sort of highlighted a bold section where each reader starts. I just thought it would be nice to almost do kind of a responsive reading together. All of this okay with everybody? Okay. Thank you. So, and I'll be referring to my long list of notes here for tonight. So So first, I really want to thank Reverend Joy Fallon for inviting me to be with you this evening. It's an honor to be with King's Chapel. I hope that you know that you are really a leader in Boston in doing your own work and your own historic interrogation into a very old, important congregation. When we started out with our work to research the history of enslavement related to First Church Roxbury, which is the campus we inherited and inhabit, we actually turned to King's Chapel to consult with us. And we met with Reverend Joy and some other staff there to help us get a sense of what it took to do the work that you had done to help us begin the work that we've been doing. And so we in some ways stand on your shoulders, and you should give yourselves a big pat on the back for leading the way and doing the important work that you're doing. That is brave and courageous and important work. So I wondered if people would put into the chat for a moment, if you could. Does everybody feel comfortable using the chat function? Okay. If you could just put into the chat like what you hope to get out of this evening, just so I can get a sense of it and keep, if there was there's lots of ways that you can spend any evening of the week. We're all busy. There's lots of information, but why did you tune in tonight? Is it to practice Lent, to observe Lent? Was it to learn more about the work of the urban ministry, more about enslavement? Did you want to know like the way we were doing it? What was it that prompted you to tune in tonight? I would love if you think of it now or later, just because I would love to make sure that I'm also including anything that you brought in terms of hopes. So feel free to chat whenever you feel like it. Okay. So how many people just know the urban ministry well or have been there? Amanda knows us, Betsy, other people. Who else? I'm going to kind of say who've been to the urban ministry.
Earl.
Okay. Okay. Some people, a mix of people, some people haven't. Thank you, Tim. Okay, people are chatting. This is really great. I'm going to just read these. General education on the urban ministry, building relationships with the urban ministry. Thank you. I tuned in to learn things to do or not do as we move forward on the path that we're on. Learn more about the urban ministry and the way that King's Chapel can be more in partnership, to learn more about reckoning with the past as it relates to enslavement, and to determine ways to move forward with a living memorial, reparation as collective institutional and penance. It's all wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. I think I'm going to hit on most of those. That's really helpful. All of the above. Okay. So let me then begin with learning more about the urban ministry. So the urban ministry, where I serve as executive director, and as Amanda said, I've been here for about 10 years. We are a very old nonprofit organization, and we were founded 200 years ago, which in the world of nonprofits is pretty old. And we were founded by a Unitarian minister named the Reverend Joseph Tuckerman, who's considered a pioneer in the field of social work. And when Reverend Tuckerman started his work in Boston, he both wanted to, he was of his era in some way. He wanted to meet the material needs of those who lived in financial poverty, but he also sought to educate more privileged Bostonians about the conditions that led to poverty. And so that is a thread that can be traced through the work of the urban ministry into today. And the urban ministry, we have a range of programs in 2025. Obviously, through the course of 200 years, there have been lots of different things that we've done. We've had, we've had prison advocacy work. We've done work with people who've been formerly incarcerated. We've had free legal clinics. We've had an Asian appropriate food pantry. And the reason why we've lasted so long as a nonprofit is that we always adapt, right? We change and we adapt. And so in 2025, we have an after-school program for young people of color from Boston. We have a summer employment program. We have a domestic violence shelter, and we do a lot of what we broadly call community engagement through the arts, through humanities, through tours. And we look for ways to work with Roxbury, nonprofit organizations and businesses, and connect that work to Unitarian Universalist congregations so that we can build solidarity and work together for change. So that's in a bit of a big nutshell who and what the urban ministry is. Where our history, that's already sort of, that's already a lot to think about, that history being encircled by member congregations. What does that mean to be an organization that's encircled by mostly white, mostly suburban congregations and trying to do the work of racial, social, and economic justice? But then to add another layer to our complexity is where we are and the campus that we're in. So in 1976, and this is always tricky to explain this. In 1976, one of our member congregations, First Church Roxbury, it had dwindled, right? It was in the heart of Roxbury in John Eliot Square. It had been here since the 1630s when the Puritans gathered. And that same congregation that had changed from Puritan became the Unitarians, worshiped steadfastly on this piece of land. The congregation had dwindled mostly because of white flight from Roxbury out to the suburbs, right? So there was a small number of people still here, and they decided to fold. And they decided to bequeath their property to the urban ministry. It's like if King's Chapel had dwindled and decided we're not going to carry on anymore. So we're gonna fold and we're gonna merge. Legally, it was a merger, but in essence, it was a bequeathing their material goods, their property to us. And so we were on Arlington Street downtown at that time. My worst night, it's not gonna happen. Don't worry, James. You're gonna go strong. You're going strong. You're doing important things. So not to worry about that at all, I'm sure. And so we inherited this really stunning campus, and I'm going to show you some pictures in a moment for those of you who haven't been there. It's Boston's oldest surviving wood frame church building. So it's the 5th meeting house on the site. So there was like a little building in the 1630s that was, I don't know, razed or burned and whatever, subsequent meeting houses until the last one was built in 1804. It's now a Boston landmark. Really important building, lots of history on this site, lots of Revolutionary War history from this piece of green space, just lots of stories to tell. If you look up Roxbury in Wikipedia, it's a picture of First Church Roxbury building that illustrates Roxbury. It's very important in the community. And so at that time, it wasn't that unusual for churches, as I understand it, to fold and to give their property to the urban ministry, and the urban ministry would sell it and use the proceeds to fuel its programs. In this case, we didn't do that. We kept it, and we started operating programs out of the 2 historic buildings, First Church Roxbury and Putnam Chapel. Putnam Chapel was the parish hall built for First Church Roxbury in the mid 1800s. And so we started operating youth programs and other activities out of that space. And then about 20 years ago, built a modern building that connected it. So it's one big campus on a big piece of green space that overlooks the Boston skyline. And it's really beautiful. But the building, and I'm saying all this also, the building leads into this inheriting this property means, right? We inherit the history, right? I think it's, we inherit the history, we claim the history, good and not good. And that is all part of the work that we're doing in the history of enslavement. So when I came, there was already this energy around so the first church, Roxbury Meeting House, had experienced lots of deferred maintenance. Can I just see any hands of people who saw it years ago when it was all peeling paint and shutters broken? Anybody? Yeah, Stephen has been there. Betsy, I know Amanda, you've been here when it was, I think, pre-restoration. It was really beautiful, but really looking pretty sad. And the inside was, it still hadn't been fully converted to electricity. It was still half the lights were still gas. So that talks to you about the deferred maintenance. Old wiring, buckling plaster, heat didn't work. But there were some people who could imagine the importance of the no congregation. And there was this big question that the organization had is like, this tension between how do we even deal with this big old building when we have youth programs and a domestic violence shelter? How do we justify the energy? How do we invest in it? How do we raise the money for it? At the end of the day, the decision that I made, that the organization made, was this building is very important to Roxbury, right? Community loves it, is iconic. And we know that Roxbury deserves to have at its center a building that is just as beautiful as First Church, as Concord has, or Lexington has, in their greens, right? So the first thing that we did was restore the outside. Then we began to restore the inside. And I'm going to pause there so it's not just me. I'm going to show you a bit of a slideshow. There's other chats that came in too. Okay, all the above, got all those chats. So again, I think that you're all, in the spirit of Lent, you're going to be patient with me as I bumble around with my share screen here. So I want to show you, okay. I think I'm going to be... Thank you. King's Chapel is a delegate church to the urban ministry. Yes, thank you for making that clear. All right, I'm gonna start. Oop. Now, for some reason, I'm having a hard time seeing people when I'm showing my screen, but can somebody say aloud, can you see this?
Yes.
Yep.
All right.
Yes.
So you can see this is First Church Roxbury. Right, it's quite beautiful, and it's really a predominant feature in this landscape. And here are just a few of the befores and after, or durings and after. So here's a image of when we were starting to tackle some of the outside work with the scaffolding, and that was the first stage of our work because we wanted to immediately change our presence, our visible presence in Roxbury. And so we've started with the outside to make some really basic repairs. Again, all the shutters were broken and askew. You can't really see that here, but the clock was broken. I remember one of the local neighbors came up to me when I first got here and said, other communities have a church, have a clock that works. Why is our clock broken? You can't see the time. And so that was one of the repairs that we made. This picture is actually more recent exterior work we found when we did some work on the front doors more recently, that the whole front sill had decayed. So we had to jack up the entire building, and that was a whole long process. We successfully did it, repaired that front sill, and recently now added new front doors. This is the inside. You can see the scaffolding that was up on the interior to do all this work on the ceilings. That's the wood planks, or what's called a dance floor, so the workers could get access to the ceiling. You can see how beautiful, if you haven't been in there now, it's all the crumbling plaster has been scraped, everything repainted, all the pews restored, repainted. Some moved out for more of a performance area. You can see an example from left to right what the plaster looked like then and now. And that this is you might be able to see us when that's a speaker because we have installed a new sound system. And gives you a good example of a before and after for the walls. This is where we put in a disabled accessible entrance into the meeting house. Just some views of, it's very beautiful. This is a nice outside. future. So, so as we claim that history, it has been part of our thinking about what the mission and vision of the organization is. And then into about 2020, right before COVID hit, we had started to work on a new mission and vision statement. We'd had kind of this vague mission statement that I think was dancing around some of the issues of what it meant to be a white-led organization in the heart of Boston's historic Black community, right? And I think that the language didn't get right to it, and so we were working on our mission and vision. And I just want to share that with you. Let me see if I can do that. All right. One moment. So, wow, doing this. But this is our mission, and that we worked on for a long time. It says our mission: we work across race and place to dismantle racism and white supremacy culture and to advance racial, economic, and social justice, which is a big, ambitious mission, right? And our vision is envisioning a greater Boston where all people live with freedom and dignity and have equitable access to resources and opportunity to shape the present and the future. So as we were developing that very bold mission and vision, George Floyd was killed, right? And it was a time when I'm trying to find a way if I can fix my screen so that I can see you when I'm sharing the screen, because it's not doing that right now.
It might be, I can take you off spotlight and we'll see if that helps.
I don't think it's that, because
No.
I've done it before, but so I don't think it's that. But we'll actually, what I'm going to do is when I show you the We Speak Now, I'm actually going to see if Amanda, if you would be willing to call on people to read, because I won't be able to see people.
Sure.
And it would help a lot. Okay. So George Floyd was killed, and as we know, lots of organizations said a lot of things then. Some, as we know, are backing away now. We are not backing away from the commitments that we made, nor will we back away. The We Speak Now statement, came out of that growing reckoning and awareness that white people had about the history of enslavement and the brutality that still lasted into the present day. And so this was really the launch pad for why we started to do our work on enslavement, our work researching. So I'm going to pull this up, and Amanda, if you would be so kind as to call on people, and you'll see that each section begins with a bold. And then if everyone could read the parts in italics together, I know it'll be clunky, but and we'll hear a bunch of different voices, but if you're willing to do it, I think it's nice for us to just experience it together, if you would be so kind to do that. So let me try. So this was a document that our board unanimously adopted, and that we continue to live by, almost equally to our mission and vision. Come up, just try that again. Can you see this?
Yes.
I don't know why I
Yes.
cannot see you. Okay,
Yes.
so I'm going to turn it over to Amanda.
Okay, so perhaps I'll
Can
read
you read the
first.
beginning and then call on the next person, please.
Okay.
And you could start in all the parts that say two, that's the beginning of a new person.
Okay, so then I'll start with one, and then everybody else comes in when it's
Yep, if you can
Italics?
call on who's going to be number 2, number 3. Yep.
Okay, all right. As the United States and Greater Boston confront the painful consequences of systemic racism, ignited by the deaths of innocent African Americans, including George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and many named and unnamed others, the Board of the Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministries stands as one to say this. Through the UU Urban Ministries' 190-year history, we have predominantly been led by people who are white and our work framed by people with the privileges conferred by their whiteness.
We have
We have
not
not
said
said
enough.
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 Okay, I'm going to call on Cliff Allen next.
In the spring of 2020, we will not flinch. We were birthed in a nation and community built upon racism and white supremacy. The death of George Floyd tracks an unbroken line from slavery through lynching, Jim Crow, and mass incarceration. Systemic racism is baked into every single system of Greater Boston and this nation. Our courts, politics, transportation, environmental protections, healthcare, education, economy, and housing. One way these systemic inequities have manifested is the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on people and communities of color.
And we have,
And
We have
not
not
said
said
enough.
Enough. Betsy Peterson.
The UU Urban Ministry stands at the intersection between communities, Boston's historic African American community, directly and disproportionately impacted by economic, educational, social, environmental, and health injustice, encircled by UU member congregations of predominantly white people who have inherited their privilege, power.
And we
We have not
said enough.
Asked enough. Okay. Stephen Courtney.
These past weeks may lead to an awakening of white people who hold power. We resolve to claim this opportunity and live into our potential to challenge and dismantle institutional racism. We speak now. We commit to the following. We will continue to transform our historic Roxbury campus, inherited in 1976 from a UU congregation that died by white flight, into a hub to serve the community of Roxbury. We will prioritize using our space to serve our programs and also groups working for racial justice. We will welcome artists and leaders speaking truth about our nation's history and use our historic meeting house to highlight Roxbury artists and speakers of color.
Cynthia Perkins.
we will interrogate the racial history of our inherited meeting house and investigate ways that First Church Roxbury and the UU Urban Ministry served and failed to serve people of color. And we will tell those multiple stories. We will deepen our investment in programming that addresses racial economic injustice, in particular calling on member congregations to invest in cultural institutions and businesses led and owned by people of color.
Anna Elliott.
You'll have to move the screen up. Okay, we will ensure that before the end of 2022, we will welcome at least 5 new board members of color, bringing board racial composition to greater balance. We will support and challenge member congregations to confront institutional racism in Greater Boston and in their own communities.
Sylvia Soderberg.
I was trying to say I just got here because I couldn't make the link work before. I don't know what you're asking, so.
Oh, sure. Could you read where it says number 7 up until the italics?
No, I couldn't.
Okay. Wonderful.
Could not. because I don't
Let's have James.
Go on, yeah.
7. We will use our voice to speak up on critical issues that perpetuate the systems birthed in enslavement. We will create a board accountability structure to ensure we remain focused on these priorities in the years to come. In this time of great upheaval, we commit to bringing the change that we seek.
Time is more than 400 years
too late.
Time is now.
is
Time.
now.
No.
Thank you, everybody. Well done. I appreciate it. So I highlighted that one section about interrogating the history of the meeting house, and I highlighted it and shared this with you because this is really the beginning of the commitment to do the research that I'm here to focus on. So after we made that commitment, we started asking ourselves, so we started working on it in various ways, and it was lots of things we were committing to, you know, some very specific, and including interrogating the history of First Church Roxbury. And so to begin with, we partnered with the Roxbury Historical Society, whose members include Byron Rushing and others, asking how did other people do this? How did other institutions do it? We met with the Shirley Eustace House. As I mentioned, we met with Reverend Fallon. And finally, we set on a course. We engaged a researcher named Abid Ali Bai, who is a doctoral, he's a PhD candidate at Harvard in African American Studies. And he had done some work for the Eustace House about some enslavement research. And he was incredibly generous, and because he believed so strongly, he did not charge us much. We didn't have much of a budget for it at that time. He said he would be willing to do the research for us. He served as an intern. He worked as an internship with us to do that enslavement research. And so so as a part of that paid internship, he began researching, and what he researched was looking at the beginning of the founding of the First Church Roxbury through the Revolutionary War. And he combed through documents and archives, and he found a lot of material, including the names of nearly 80 people of color who were mentioned in the records, 58 of whom were enslaved people, with even the first minister being an enslaver. And that I will share just where you can find that report on our website here. So this is one of the pages under Examining Our History, Scourge of Slavery. And if you go here, you can find Abid's report. So this report, this just shows you all the names of people of color and enslaved persons that he located in the records. Some of the people, he had some more, some narrative, some more stories that he was able to find. And this has become kind of the building block for our work. And I'd like to just show you, how much time do we have? Well, I think I'm gonna not do that right now. So with that, we took that and we made some presentations to the community, and we prioritized, I think for the purposes of this evening, I'll say that we prioritized the local community of Roxbury when it came to sharing that information first. So it became, the Boston Globe covered the work that we were doing. When we presented it to the community, we do a lot of events and a lot of different efforts to draw in the local community to our campus. That was like a standing room only kind of event. And that demonstrated to us the level of interest that the local community of color has in this work, right? Like people wanted to hear it. And so I remember we had folks probably know Byron Rushing and who Byron Rushing is. He's a former board member of ours. He's the head of the Roxbury Historical Society. He has been very important in working on this with us. And so we had the first in-person presentation with Abid Ali Bai and Byron, and it was just a packed room. And that night we said, like, this is a first step, right? This can't be the end of it. And so we just opened up our process to the local community and said, we want you to decide, how do we take this from here, right? I know that Reverend Joy said that, that part of the theme this year for you all, and the Lenten theme, is that sense of listening, right? And I think that is very important to be lifting up, and it is certainly very important in our work for racial justice. As an organization that is rooted in white history, that still has white leadership, for us to be really listening to the local community. And so in this process, we took from that foundational report, we provide a lot of the kind of the platform, so we convene people, we schedule meetings, do community dinners, but we have a really strong, robust history committee that has made decisions about where do they want to take the research next. And I'm just going to show you on our website our history committee.
Can I raise up a question while you're looking for that?
Yes.
We have a question from Cynthia. Who is the we that you're referring to in the process? Is it staff? Is it board? Is it community? Who is the we, the us?
Which we was it? I feel like
we, as you were renovating, and then it was again the we as you created this amazing purpose statement. Is that your
so
board?
we the urban ministry, and we're a nonprofit. So when we're talking about the mission and vision, that's our board of directors, which operates like any board of directors. So we're not a congregation, we're a faith-based nonprofit. And so it's our board of directors that came up with our mission and vision. Yeah. So I'm going to just share our history committee, which is a shared committee with the urban ministry and the Roxbury Historical Society. So this, if you go to our website, you'll find us there. So this is some of our members, Susie Buchanan, Marcia Buttman, John Ellertson, Judge Leslie Harris, Judge Geraldine Hines. They're both neighbors. Sumaya Colin Knight, Marissa Luz, who's also on our board, Senator Liz. She's a very passionate history buff, but she's not active in it. Obviously, she can't be. Thomas Plant, Crystal Rollins Jackson, Byron Rushing, Joyce Stanley, and our own youth manager, Reggie Walker. But I share that because that gives a sense of that's the committee that's guiding us forward. And what is important to so the committee has met monthly ever since we did that first report, and the two goals that the committee settled on that are most important are: one, learning more about the lives of those who are named in Abid's report, right? Do all the work that is possible to find if it's possible to trace lineage to today and to find residents living in Roxbury today whose forebears were enslaved persons. That's number one. The second goal was to teach young people in Roxbury how to trace their lineage back. In some ways, it's going from both directions, right? So those are the two goals. And And we were fortunate, we received a Harvard Reparative Partnership grant to help us. We were able to put out an advertisement for graduate students to continue the research. We were able to hire, and again, it's, you know, I'm saying we, this is we History Committee, right? So the History Committee did this work. The History Committee is making these decisions. And the History Committee hired the two researchers based on a pretty robust pool of applicants. One is a doctoral student at Boston University, and one is a graduate student at MIT Urban Studies. And so one is in particular, they're both working together, but one is more focused on tracing the lineage of enslaved persons and has made a tremendous amount of progress. And the other is working with young people in our after school program to work with them to really think more about this history. How do they connect with their history? And last week, I thought I got these pictures in today, and I thought it was a really nice way to finish up what I'm saying, which is to show you some images of, all right, let's try to do this. So this last week, these are some of the young people in our after school program. They went to American Ancestors, which, as you may know, does work into genealogical research. And the young people were spending time, they were basing their research on Martin Luther King's life, but learning what some of the skills are to do that genealogical tracing and to give them an interest in tracking their own family stories, their own history. There's a lot more that I could say about why that is so important, in particular, perhaps for communities of color, where people have often been cut off from their history, in just one of the many ways that damage has been done, and why it is very important for the community of color to do that work. So that is where we are. And I want to, we have about 15 minutes for questions. So I wonder if we could take me off spotlight and just, yeah. So that's where we are. And thank you for listening to that that was much longer than I thought I would be done in like 15 minutes, but here we are, 45 minutes. So thank you. Help me sort of unpack the journey that has gotten us here. Yeah, thank you. All right, are there questions? And thank you, Amanda. Like, you're such a great, I don't know, co-pilot here. She's like all the chat things. Yeah, this is great.
I
Thank
find
you
the
so
links
much.
and I put them in the chat, but thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Very goodness you're here, because I know what's happening with I can't see you when I'm sharing my screen. Okay. Do you have questions or comments or reactions?
Stephen Courtney has his hand up.
Yeah.
Stephen.
Mary Margaret, one of the things I recall that seemed more unique for you is the history with Native American slavery. Could you talk a bit about that?
Well, I can only talk like a thumbnail about it, because I think there's so much work that we have to do in terms of that relationship with Native people, and there's many layers to it. So in Abbott's report, there are Native people who are, in fact, the first minister of First Church Roxbury enslaved a Native person. So there's most certainly that history is part of our history. There's also the history of John Eliot as he was not actually the parish minister. He was one of the first ministers, but he was more like a family minister. But he's considered, you may have heard of John Eliot, he's called the apostle to the Indians for his, and worked to translate the Bible into the native language of Algonquin. Although I'm learning more about that he was given credit when it was really Native people who had helped him to do that, and they aren't credited. So there's that history of John Eliot. There's also that the Native people were on the site before First Church Roxbury was here. And so there's a lot of history that we haven't really gotten far down that road, Stephen, but I certainly hope that day will come when we'll do more of that work. Cheryl.
I think it's so important, of course, to ask for communities of color to contribute, to the efforts. And I wonder how, I know Byron Rushing is involved in a lot of different things. And I wonder how did you and how could we approach connecting with communities outside our own without exhausting a few leaders and asking them to do work for us in our repair?
Mm. Yeah, because your location is so different from ours, right?
Yes.
Right.
You know, I hadn't thought about that. This is a great question. So I get, but you've done some of your work, some of your research. Have you connected at all? When we got on, Betsy was talking about that one of the, descendants of somebody who had built your pews had contacted you. And I think there's like a lot, people love to, I mean, not all people, but many people love to connect with their history. So do you know are there any people who are listed in any of the historic research so that you can connect with anybody from today and start some? Oh, you know who else?
Well, yeah.
I'm going to take. Are you connected with the Lloyd family?
Yes,
the slave legacy.
They'll be
I
speaking
would
to
go
us in a
there.
few weeks. Yeah.
Yeah.
And let me also
yeah.
note that we were the recent recipients of a Lilly Endowment grant, and we've hired a consultant who can help us do some strategic planning and help us engage more in the community. But I guess I just wondered, I asked the
I
question
looked
without
at-
really
No, that's
realizing
great.
that you're in a
That's
different
great.
location. So
Yeah.
you have natural allies.
they've got proximity.
Yeah.
But I think the
Maybe
Slave
that's the
Legacy
answer.
History Coalition and the Lloyd, Dennis Lloyd would be a good, I mean, if he's he seems very generous with his.
He's actually on the speaker list as one of the Lenten speakers.
Oh, yay. Okay.
But
good.
not everybody knows about him. So I'll just briefly say that I think many of you know that one of the enslavers who was a member of King's Chapel was Isaac Royal. And Isaac Royal had enslaved a man named something Vassal. I forget his first name. And the amazing thing is that the Lloyds are descendants of the person who was enslaved, but they have connected with descendants of the royal family. And it'll be really interesting when I think David is the first name of the one who's speaking with us. I don't.
Dennis Lloyd.
Dennis, yeah.
Dennis Egypt, yeah.
Is
Yeah,
on
and he's,
will
yeah,
be one of our Monday evening speakers in a few weeks, I think it is.
I think that's wonderful. I mean, I think that's
No,
a place
we have
start.
descendant search very much on our minds. It's something we haven't really started, but we're lucky to have made that connection and certainly hope to make more.
That's great. And thank you, Amanda. She keeps going. That's awesome. And then Mr. Lloyd has attended a couple of our meetings, to figure out how do we, with our history committee, so how we can intersect a bit. So I think that you're on a great path. Yeah.
Cynthia has a
Yep.
question.
Cynthia.
I'm
Oh,
thinking,
and James. Yeah.
I'm thinking about the meeting we had last week, and there was talk about how to figure out how reparations would happen. And I left that meeting totally mind-boggled by how would one possibly come up with a dollar figure that was owed to people who are the descendants of those who were enslaved people. And I wonder how your committee, that it sounds like a fantastic committee, the history committee, are they thinking, what is their goal? Are they looking at change or just to find out more about your history, or are they looking to change certain things in the community or the systemic kind of issues? I mean, the mission said so much. Is there any game plan, and does reparations with a dollar figure figure into it, because that's sort of mind-boggling to me how we'd possibly ever come up with that. But so that was a question I had for your group, which seems so very active and exciting that you're really working in the heart of the community with community people. It's very exciting to hear about it.
You know, it's interesting because I guess what I personally feel is there's a lot to be said about when we think about reparation, what repair, what does healing mean, right? Because but for me, the enslavement work is following where it leads and staying open to that, right? And I think we're staying open to that. Like, where is it leading us? Like, who do we find that, you know, who do we connect with who were the descendants? And what does that mean? And what does that ask of us? You know, and I think I just feel like we keep following it, right? At a minimum, just as a minimum, the issue that has come up that the Urban Ministry Board has asked the History Committee to make recommendations about how this history should be shown and made visible in the meeting house as it's now restored and open. And how can every visitor who comes in, how do we ensure that history is plain for everybody to see? And so we will be the Urban Ministry Board will be waiting for recommendations from the committee about what they want to see and how they want that history acknowledged. So that's like, I think a first step. But thanks for that question, Cynthia. James.
Thank you. I wanted to ask what other institutions in Roxbury, and specifically if there are other still active houses of worship, especially Black congregations that you partner with and have relations with. And then sort of something for the broader people here to think about, since I don't know as a non-local, as a long distance member, is there some broader ecumenical or interfaith umbrella through which we could connect with primarily Black houses of worship for our own work?
I would say our strongest partners have not been the Black churches for a variety of reasons. We've tended to work more directly with more arts organizations actually, and do more of our work in partnership through the arts and humanities and history than we have with other faith institutes, in part because our theology is, there's lots of reasons. Socially, sometimes we're very, some of our social justice commitments are different. Some of our theology is very different. So you know, I think just as an aside, I think I'm thinking more about how do we work with approximate churches, just because everything coming down the pike with legislative changes that are going to impact very vulnerable people, and trying to figure out what does that really look like on the ground. But historically, our strongest partners have more been in the arts, humanities, history, and social justice. Betsy.
I want to, this is connected to your question about people learning what you're doing, but I'm curious about the gentleman behind you, the display behind you. Is that?
Oh, yeah. This is Lewis Hayden, who was an abolitionist who worked with William Lloyd Garrison, whose funeral was held in First Church Roxbury. And I believe Lewis Hayden was a pallbearer for, I think. Yeah. So both abolitionists. I like it behind my shoulder because it says something, right?
So is that where a lot of people see it?
Behind my shoulder, yeah. Yeah. I always keep it right there. Yeah.
We just recently put a display in the chapel that shows pictures of the statue that we hope to install in a few months. So we haven't had, you know, anything obvious, anything you can that it's hard to avoid in the chapel until recently.
I'm just looking at the chats, Amanda, that we host many wonderful music programs. Yes, we do. That's the somebody left for their child. Building. I'm interested in ideas about building a living memorial. That's cool. Relationship building, educational programming, maybe an annual speaker series that raises up organizations that are just racial justice. I just love the concept of living memorial. I don't have anything I could add to that. I think that's great, Amanda. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we're in ongoing dialogues about this at King's Chapel, and I would guess with your knowledge of our congregation and where it is and the history of what your organization is doing and how it's already perhaps doing this relationship building, like just what maybe comes to mind if you were like 10 years from now, you'd be like, wow, it's so cool that King's Chapel established this living memorial. Like, what might it be?
I do think that you should feel proud of the work that you've undertaken. I think you should. You are very historic, very important historic congregation. And you were ahead of the pack, right, in doing this work and taking it on. And I think, hats off to you. Hats off to Reverend Fallon's leadership. I think she is deeply committed and authentic, and it shows. And I think you should feel good about the work that you've undertaken, and continue to lead the way.
To append Cynthia's question a little bit, last week there was a bit of conversation about the difference between reparations or a living memorial and charity. And I wondered how your group might have dealt with that.
I think I don't know how my group would, what I would say the difference between, so there's this quote on the wall of the urban ministry when you come in, and I think I'll close with this because we're at 6, but almost. It's by the Aboriginal activist Lila Watson, and it says, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." And I think that, yes, white people have benefited from the systems of oppression. People of color have been, experienced, harm that is ongoing. And we are both caught up in a pretty broken system that we have benefited from, but we are also wounded by. And so I guess for me, part of it is like, we're trying to repair the whole thing, right? Charity keeps us elevated as if like we're in this position to a better than. And I think repair is more about like, we're all trying to heal a really broken world, and we are seeing it, the impact today as we speak in the national headlines. And I think it's a direct result of enslavement and the repercussions from a really racist nation, to be frank. So that's what I think is the difference. We need to understand that we all need the repairs. We all need it to make amends.
Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Mary Margaret. And thank you all for coming as well. And Amanda, again, has left great resources in the chat. And we appreciate so much the work that the UUM does.
Sam, do you want to give us a word out?
Oh, that would be lovely.
Want me to pray?
Yes,
I'll pray
ma'am.
if you like. All right, let's I invite you to join me in prayer. Holy One, we come to you hoping to know a bit more about ourselves, about our neighbors, and walk this journey during Lent. God, we understand that there's so much work to do, and we feel mighty tired sometimes. And so we ask that we will be heartened, that we'll lift each other up, and that we'll always look to your hope so that we might not fall into despair. God, on this night, give us something that delights us. Give us something maybe that challenges us just a little bit. And God, let us know that we're hidden under the shadow of your wings. And if it's your will, bring us back together. We pray all this for love's sake. Amen.
And thank you, Sam.
Thank you again.
Can I have a copy of your prayer, Sam? That was beautiful.
I don't have one. I'm glad you heard it.